I would like to present our fundamental research paper on variation in intuitive geometric construct of spatial perception during navigation. We start with geometry and non-perceptual Euclidean geometry that constitute core set of intuitions in humans and understanding environments, and the theories of isobased axial lines, partitioning spaces, space syntax, etc., that provide information of visual fields of enclosures that are heuristic in built environment studies. And importantly, the synthesis of prior intuition of space with pattern comparison, inference, etc., that inspires behavioral research in spatial navigation. Here, we focus on the importance of visual field not merely by the extent of enclosure, rather complement with selective attention of visual field in performing a task. Example, during navigation, desirability of reaching the destination established in certain cues that defines or limits the space rather than the whole enclosure itself. That's a psychological gestalt theory that the whole is other than the sum of the parts. The motivation of the study is the use of cognitive methods and complementing methods of architecture and vice versa to explain wayfinding behaviors. We here elucidate that spatial perception during navigation varies to that of the subject at stationary. Figure 1 explains the spatial perception as in reference with the number of vantage points, edges, and obstacles, things like that. And figure 2 is that it explains that it is more of a selective attention, and that perceptual space is confined in context to further movement during navigation or in accomplishing specific tasks. So we explicitly state that geometry contributes to spatial perception and varies with respect to subject state of rest or in motion. We hypothesize that the subjects use certain derived constructs while interpreting spatial information during navigation, with an assumption that those intuitive geometry could be determined geometric constructs or derived geometric constructs. To define them, determined are formed by regular geometric shapes, and the derived are those manipulated by the geometric features like nodes, edges, midpoints. So we studied a cohort of 25 subjects, average age of 19.4, 23 max, and minimum 17. The experiment 1, different shapes are shown of determined constructs made with different geometric shapes, which are repeated randomly for 4 times. And so the total is 12 stimuli. And subjects choose from the given options like that. We give 4 options, and the subjects choose to test the reliability of whether they opt for determined or derived. This level also helps as training session for the subsequent experiments. And in experiment 2, an outline of complex shapes, both in geometry and freeform are shown. Geometry 2 in plan, 3 in isometric, and 3 freeform. And in the determined constructs, they complete the geometry, and in freeform, they build the geometry. This is to test the reliance of outline features on the geometric constructs. And in specific, for determined constructs, the correlation with the derived, and in free form, the attempt to complete the form pattern and the types of number of geometric types used and total number thereof. And in experiment 3, an outline of similar shapes are shown, wherein 2 different points are given, start and end points, and the subject has to connect them, draw a path to reach the place. We have 7 stimuli here. And the result 1, in experiment 1, result shows that mode of choice, that is derived constructs, the response rate is 57%, ranging 66 to 43, compared to that of determined, which is 34, 61 to 11. However, there is wide variation. This is one of the typical examples that we have shown. The previous one, the heart thing. So here, in the first trial, overall determined construct mean is 61%, ranging 70 to 52. The first trial shows that it's a very good law of good continuity has given the subjects have opted for that. And in the subsequent trials, they made a change. They looked for a variety, and wherein we found that law of good similarity and symmetry are the possible factors. In total, for all the 3 figures, laws of symmetry, categorization, good continuity, similarity, and variety are observed. And in experiment 2A, that is free-form shapes, where subjects rely on derived constructs, though the overall response is poor, Edge sharpness has significantly increased the constructs from 23 to 73% as shown. And most of them have used two types of geometric shapes. And so we say that outline prompts geometric constructs and variance indicates, and the variance that is 6.1 in the first type, first figure, 8 and 12.4 show that people are using fractals, the kind of chunking that they have the freedom of partitioning the space. And in two geometric shapes, there is no significant relation that was found in plan and was consistent with experiment 1 that people used derived constructs. And in isometric view, there was significant negative correlation that with minimal use, they used minimal determined constructs while opting for derived and vice versa, which can be strengthened in the same figure, which is shown, which is given in plan, and the other one in isometry. And if you can look at the change in the variation of negative correlation, so they have either opted for determined while not opting derived, things like that. So here we say that though isometric is taken as a sense of depth, has a variation in construct as established by the correlations, and behavioral aspects of subjects in opting determined or derived is becoming important. Experiment 3, as already said, subjects need to draw the path, for which they have already had this perceived geometry because they have used in the previous experiments. Here we would like to cite that open field tests study tendencies of exploring environments as measured by ambulation and emotion, and that cognitive process modeling examines the construct validity of tests through careful analysis of item characteristics and permits test developers to manipulate content features of the items. So there's a wide variation in the paths opted by the subjects with a kind of concentration in certain part of the area. So we have we have taken median, that is shown in yellow, with limits given, which is taken from by the basis of standard deviation, and we call this as central ambulation. And if you look at 79% in both the shapes in all the trials, they opted for central ambulation, and the rest are away from that, which there's a behavior of thigmotaxis. So the human behavioral aspects of thigmotaxis and central ambulation are notable, and with also certain distractions. As you all know, that thigmotaxis is an automatic biologically primitive strategy of exploring space, which is centrophobic, prominent at initial encounter of space, but not associated with rate or quality of acquisition or retrieval of spatial knowledge. And so we say that central ambulation has reasons, and subjects' geometric constructs are built with certain references that are intuitive, intuitive in the sense with taking the references of the outline of the geometry, so which we call as intuitive landmarks. Coincidentally, they coincide with the determined or derived constructs, especially during navigation, which is especially during change in direction, which is very important, with higher incidence of derived constructs, which are from the fractals. So we call this as, there are certain attractions and repulsions or inattentions of the outline of the form, which we simply put it as pull-push preterration factors. So while navigating through the spaces, we have this push-pull preterration factors that are dominated by the geometric features. So individual differences vary by ability to construct basic structure. If good gestalt is not constructed, thigmotaxis remains active and basic egocentric spatial definition prevails. The main condition for the switch between egocentric and allocentric presentations would be whether the individual forms intelligible gestalt, cognitive map of the surrounding or not. Behavioral aspects in establishing allocentric, egocentric frames with determined or derived preferences convoluted vis-a-vis push-pull preteration in constructing intuitive landmarks. So intuitive landmarks with fractals demonstrate allocentric frame. So here we would like to conclude that law of similarity, symmetry, categorization, and good continuity reinforces determined or derived constructs during spatial perception, whereas intuitive landmarks formed by fractals predominantly of derived constructs help during navigation. So we propose to have further investigations on intuitive landmarks, which become very important in the aspects of pull-push preteration factors, and the relation of egocentric frame with determined constructs and allocentric frame with derived constructs, especially fractals. Nevertheless, intuitive geometric constructs can enhance human-environment interaction by capturing behaviorally relevant aspects. So my acknowledgements goes. I greatly thank the ANFA organizer for giving me the great opportunity, and my collaborators, Mehdi Kamasi at CNRS France, and Chandrasekhar Pammi, Allahabad, India, and my parent institute, Andhra University, for encouraging, not the least my parents and my family. Thank you.